Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome, my dear sisters, to another weekly Iman Booster series by Ikhna Sisters. We are in the midst of our current series, Types of Deception. Last week we discussed the two avenues through which Shaitan enters our heart, which is through our doubts and desires. Today we are going to talk about, once he enters the heart, what are the 7 strategies that he uses to wipe a person out. A famous scholar, Ibn Qayyim, illustrates these 7 strategies in detail, and today we are going to discuss the first 3, and the remaining strategies will be covered in the upcoming sessions. So sisters, please do stay tuned. Last week, I mentioned the incident that happened with one of my family members, how Shaitan became successful in putting so much doubt in that person's heart that they left the deen for a brief period of time. We all remember when 9/11 happened, how it was a very difficult time for Muslims. It was a huge test for all believers at that time. With all of the propaganda that was spread about Islam, many Muslims' faith shook. Women stopped wearing hijab. Men shaved off beards. Many people changed their names. And many just stopped practicing Islam because they didn't want to associate themselves with the so-called Muslim hijackers. Let's look at our current Muslim youth, not only in the West, but also in Muslim countries. We see that our youth is involved in so many things that are a part of Western lifestyle and against Islam, and they're getting far away from the deen. If we look at families that migrated to North America a couple of generations ago, today, sadly, their current generation is not practicing Islam. And when these people meet Muslims, they say, "Oh, my grandfather used to be a Muslim." Shaitan has successfully used his number 1 attack on these people. My brother is a director of a Muslim funeral home, and he works with families day in and day out. And he meets many different types of families, and adult Muslim children come to get funeral services when their parents pass away. And when it comes time to pray the janazah prayer, my brother gets tears in his eyes when he tells us that these Muslim children don't know how to pray a janazah prayer. In fact, they don't even know how to pray at all. Shaitan has been successful in fulfilling his ultimate goal with these people. My sisters, what is that goal? It is to leave these people's most valuable asset behind, which is their faith, and to turn them into disbelievers. Sisters, the most important inheritance that you and I can give to our children is this religion, this deen. If we don't pass it on to our current generation, which is our children, then our future generations will not be Muslims. May Allah protect the faith of our children till the day of judgment. So we see that from Shaitan's point of view, the most important goal is, in the end, to cause a believer to become a disbeliever. And we, as Muslims, need to be very, very aware of this cunning attack of Shaitan. Let's look at the next level of Shaitan that the Shaitan uses if he doesn't succeed with the first one. A person feels that he doesn't have time to pray at work, or work is more important, so he prays all of his salah at home at night, all at once, every day. And he does this throughout his life. Sisters, is there something wrong with that? I once heard a community in Canada that they decided that instead of taking time off on a Friday to go to the masjid to pray the mandatory Jummah salah, that they would get together on a Sunday to pray Jummah instead, because it's more convenient. Sisters, do you think that there's something wrong with that? Recently, I read an article in which a masjid in the U.S.A. appointed a female imam, meaning they appointed a woman to lead the prayers for men and women. Is that permissible in our deen? All of these things sound very weird, right? Yet they seem to be part of the religion somehow, right? Think about what would happen if these things became widespread and what kind of a ripple effect they would have on other Muslims. Let's look at another example. In many Muslim countries, the Prophet ﷺ's birthday is celebrated on a very large scale, very extravagantly, and it's done every year religiously, right? And these Muslims that do these celebrations, they claim that they do it out of the love of the Prophet. So I'm not going to discuss about the role of, what the Islamic point of view is on birthdays. However, I do want to point out that if celebrating the Prophet's birthday was part of our religion, then the companions of the Prophet, may Allah be pleased with them, would have done it every year. Yet there's no such evidence to be found. And moreover, if a person claims to love the Prophet ﷺ, then the most important way to show your love is to follow the teachings of that person, right? Prophet ﷺ was sent as a teacher, right? He was the best human being that ever walked the face of the earth. His charity, his kindness, his worship and obedience to Allah, that's what we need to follow if we really truly love Him, right? So think about how Shaitan deceives people in doing things the wrong way and keeps them from doing it the right way, and therefore takes them off the right path. Okay? And similarly, there's tons of examples that I can give about innovations and new things that people started doing in the deen, thinking that they're getting reward. For example, there's one other famous thing that happens in many Muslim countries where people gather in one sitting, in one place, to read the entire Quran cover to cover without the meaning. And they think that they're getting a lot of reward for it. But again, if we look at the life of the Prophet and his companions, this was never done by them. Okay? So here we see how cunningly Shaitan throws his second level of attack. He deceives people to do things in worship that the Prophet ﷺ did not do. He tries to have people invent new ways of worshiping, and when the person does it, they assume that they're getting a lot of reward and they're getting close to Allah, but in reality it's the exact opposite. They are actually doing something very seriously wrong and dangerous. And this type of innovation is known in Islam with the Arabic word bid'ah, which means to create something from nothing, meaning these religious activities are created from nothing. There's no basis, there's no narration or anything to support them. So Shaitan deceives a person to leave the ways that are taught by our beloved Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, right, which is his sunnah, and to follow the religion in new ways and to try to follow the commandments of Allah in their own way, right? And this is a very serious sin in Islam, because Allah SWT sent a teacher who showed us exactly how to follow the Quran, right? Our religion is Quran and Sunnah, both, right? You cannot take one out of the other. But Shaitan will try to get the Sunnah part out and have people do things their own way to misguide them, okay? So this is again called bid'ah. We need to have sufficient knowledge about the life of the Prophet and his teachings. And we need to do everything possible to stay away from this innovation. Okay? Now, a lot of Muslims are involved, like I said, in doing these bid'ah, and they feel that not only is it a reward, but also that even if it's not the way of the Prophet, it's not a big deal. It's okay. What's wrong? What's wrong with doing things a little bit differently, right? What's wrong with praying Jummah on a Sunday, right? Astaghfirullah. So, my sisters, we have to understand that Islam takes these type of things very seriously, and they're very dangerous. Why is it so serious? It's serious because innovations such as these, they change our religion. They corrupt it. They tamper with it. And then it is no longer pure. We know that our religion has been preserved, right, since the time of the Prophet, 1400 years ago, and it will remain preserved till the Day of Judgment. So these type of innovations are attempts of Shaitan to pollute it, to make it something that it's not, so people get misguided. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised to keep this deen preserved, and we need to follow what Allah has commanded us to do, which is the only way to keep it pure and preserved is to follow the sunnah, the life of the Prophet and his teachings completely, and to not do anything that he did not do. If we look at quickly as to how religions have been destroyed through these innovations, we can just simply look at the religion of Christianity. If you look at Christianity, it is nothing of what was taught to the people by their messenger, Prophet Jesus, peace be upon him, right? In fact, the greatest innovation in Christianity is the belief in Jesus as God. That's the biggest innovation to begin with, because we know that all prophets were sent by Allah. They were all Muslims. They all brought the same message of monotheism and the worship of one God. And Jesus never told the people that he was the Son of God or that he was God. This was all invented by the people, and this is how the whole religion became corrupted. In fact, it was Shaitan that came to the people and told them to invent this lie about Jesus, peace be upon him, and Allah. Right? So this was all the work of Shaitan, and Shaitan introduced bid'ah into the Christian religion, and now it became something that it was never before. My sister once asked a Christian who was celebrating Christmas, "Do you know anything about the life of Jesus, peace be upon him?" And that person said, "You know what? I don't know anything about Jesus." Right? So which is so sad, that the main message of the messenger has been lost. And now new things are getting innovated into the religion. There's a narration by our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that we hear every week when we go for our Jummah khutbah, and the narration is in Arabic, "Kullu bid'atin dalala wa kullu dalalatin finnar." The Prophet ﷺ said, every innovation is a misguidance, and every misguidance leads to the hellfire. And this narration is from the 5 authentic books of Hadith. And this is exactly what Shaitan wants us to do. Shaitan wants us to do innovations so that we can get misguided. Let's move on. Going back to thinking from the satanic point of view, if a person doesn't lose their faith, and Shaitan does not get them to invent new ways of doing rituals in their religion, then Shaitan thinks of the third level of attack. Okay, he does not leave these people alone until he attacks them at the third level, right? And let's see what that is. I listen to the news every day while driving to work, and it's just so depressing because all I hear on the news is evil happening all around me. All I hear on the news is killing and police brutality and horrible sexual crimes committed against people, right? And of theft, identity theft, right? Fraud. It's just so depressing to hear the news, right? And if you think about it, this is exactly what Shaitan has made people to do, right? It's all the work of Shaitan. The Quran speaks about these evils in Surah number 4, verse number 31. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "If you avoid great sins which you are forbidden, we will expiate from you your small sins and cause you to enter an honorable place of entering, which is paradise." If we look carefully, we will notice that all of the sins or all of the evils that we hear on the news every day are classified as major sins in Islam, right? And we as Muslims need to know these major sins and what their consequences are, right? And what's the most ironic thing is that some of the evils that we hear about in the news or that are prevalent in our society are major sins in Islam. However, they're not considered bad in society anymore. For example, crimes like or sins like homosexuality and adultery 50 years ago in the United States were considered as wrong and bad, but today they're considered acceptable, and people are encouraged to accept them, right? So sisters, we need to understand that the standards of morality and what is evil and what is good has been set by Allah. He is the creator, and He is the one that decides on what is evil and what is good, and we have to believe and follow that, not what society tells us, right? So I made a list of about 10 top major sins that are prevalent in our society, and the list is just so long that I just narrowed down to 10, and we noticed that this is all what Shaitan has been successful in getting people to do, right? And you and I have to understand that this is attack of shaitan and we need to protect ourselves from these. So these top major 10 sins are as follows. Number 1, associating partners with Allah. So going back to making Jesus God or Son of God, right? Losing hope in Allah's mercy, not fearing Allah, or not thinking that you're going to be punished by Allah. Number 3, practicing black magic. Number 4, dealing with interest. Number 5, fornication, adultery, homosexuality. Number 6, slandering a chaste man or woman, or gossiping about people's personal lives, right? Consuming alcohol. Number 7. Number 8, arrogance. Number 9, not paying charity and zakat. Number 10, theft, fraud. So we see, sisters, how shaitan uses various levels of attacks to destroy a person and doom them to hell. His main goal is to get a person to leave their faith and to become disbeliever. And if that doesn't work, then shaitan will try to have people leave the way of the Prophet and the true way of following the religion and invent new ways of doing things. And he will make them seem as if they're religious things that people are getting reward for. But in reality, they're actually going far away from the deen. And if those two attacks don't work on a person, then shaitan uses his third level of attack, which is to deceive that person and to have them commit major sins, right? And that's what we see around society today. So may Allah protect us from all levels of shaitan's attack. May Allah help us to put a guard around us so that we may be protected, inshaAllah. That's all for today. Until we meet again in the next Iman Booster series. Wa akhir dawana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen.